months ago, I did a middle school chapel, and the next day, the shirt was in my box, along with an anonymous note. And the note was from a middle school teacher whom I still do not know who it was. And hopefully he or she will watch this TED Talk and go, oh, he's thanking me. Because I wanted to thank this person. He or she mentioned that she really enjoyed the messages that I was giving in middle school chapel. And in that particular chapel, I referenced E.T. So let me begin by referencing E.T. yet again. Towards the end of the film, Gertie goes up to say goodbye to E.T. before he goes off in the spaceship. And she's got that potted plant that's so symbolic throughout the film. And she lays it down at E.T.'s feet and stands up. And she says, goodbye. And E.T. sort of puts his hand up, you know how he does. And he says, be good. And she responds immediately, yes. Well, I'm afraid that when I was her age, up and through about to when I was 17, 18 years old, my answer would have been a definitive no. Because I was not good. I was good at being bullied, but I was not good in any way, shape, or form. And my bullying came out greatly at the summer camp that my parents sent me to, from the age 9 to 15. And I have, since that time, been very sensitive to bullying and sensitive that it's important to build a community so that bullies do not feel welcome there at all. So my bullying began as an 11-year-old when I was a captain of our color war team. So half the 11-year-olds were on the brown team, half were on the green team, and we played games at each other's for 5 points. 5 valuable points all summer long. And I wanted my team to win. Not only was I a bully, I was also really competitive. And I pushed my team, and we didn't work hard, but I worked them hard, and I was derisive towards the other team. And eventually the head counselor, Uncle Bennett Myers, needed to call me into his office. I was sort of like going to the dean of boys or dean of girls and speaking to that person about your behavior. And it was frightening for an 11-year-old to go into this office. And Uncle Ben said to me, now Jimmy, all the people call me Jimmy, Jimmy, your teammates have been really concerned and have spoken to me about how you treat them. And they feel like you're bullying them and you're not giving them an opportunity to play the positions they want. And I said, but Uncle Ben, we haven't lost a game all season. Of course, that was not the point he was trying to make. But that was the end of my leadership roles as a camper at camp. No longer did any camper think that I should be in any type of leadership role at all, and I spent the rest of my years not leading groups or teams, what have you. But I turned my bullying towards what I called a target bullying, where I would target kids at camp who I felt were not as regarded or not as in the safety net of the adults or other kids, so that I could sort of get away with my bullying. And in one particular incident, I was sitting with a good friend of mine, is still a good friend of mine, up on a volleyball referee stand, and this boy, Steve, came up to start walking up to join us on this referee stand. And my friend next to me sort of felt it coming, and tried to nudge me to stop, but I looked down, and I said to him, you are not coming up here. Get as far away from us as possible. I said that to another person. And he walked away back to where he was sitting and started crying. And my friend looked at me like I should go down and talk to him. But that was not in my capacity to do. My friend, a wonderful soul, did go down and comfort this boy. Sort of left me off the hook. And I didn't stop there. I mentioned my competitiveness, and there was a game where we lost. Clearly it was the umpire's fault. Who else's fault would it be? And the umpire, to be sure, was a fellow camper. And we were all sitting in the bunk waiting for second call to go up to dinner. And Ronnie, that was the camper, walked in, and we called him, not so nicely, Dots, because he had a lot of moles on his arms and his face. And I guess the bunk, about 12 of us sitting in there, were just waiting for me to erupt. And I didn't disappoint. Only later did I find disappointment in this. And I said, Dots, just turn yourself around. You cost me that game and I don't want to see you ever. And he didn't turn around until he started crying. And he walked out. Now I'll fast forward a few years where our camp, a lot of alumni come back to be counselors. And pretty much it's a rubber stamp application. If you were a camper at camp, you wanted to be a counselor, poof, you're a counselor. I didn't get the rubber stamp poof, not by any means. I learned later that the only reason I was granted the job was that the owner-director had asked a number of counselors who I kept in touch with if I was worth giving a job to, if I would be worthy of being a camp counselor at my camp. And they, unbeknownst to me, vouched for me. And I went to camp to be a counselor, and we had, of course, the classic orientation. We would learn about being a counselor and how to be good to your kids and how to form a community, and it really went completely over my head. And then we had the famous meeting where the camp director lays out who's in each bunk. And the younger counselors are usually in the small bunks with 2 or 3 other counselors and the younger boys. And I'm waiting for my name to be called. And I'm waiting. And I'm waiting. And I figure, oh, this is the way they're telling me I didn't cut mustard and I'm going to have to leave. And they finally get to bunk 12. Bunk 12. And they say, Jimmy Astrove. And I go, oh, bunk 12. Which was a pretty plum assignment for a young counselor. Bunk 12 was pretty much out of the bedwetting stage. And the boys were 10, 11 years old and had been to camp before, so I was pretty much in good shape. So I read up on the boys, and fortunately, none of them had been at camp 3 years previous when Jimmy's reign of terror was going on. So they did not know of my prior deeds. And strange things happened that first day. If you've been to camp, you know that the kids get out of the buses and they run for the bunk list to see who's in their bunk and whose bunk they've got. And they find the counselor, and all of a sudden they're carrying 4 duffel bags. Back then I did carry 4 duffel bags. And got to the bunk, we make our beds, we get everything set up, and we went to dinner. And after dinner we did an assembly. And at the assembly we greeted all the new campers, and then tattoo blows, and we go back to our bunk to put the boys to sleep. And the boys went up to the greenhouse to go to the bathroom and brush their teeth and came back, and they're getting their pajamas, and I'm sitting on my bed, which is no further away than you are all sitting right here in the smaller bunk, and I realized that there was something to this camp counselor that I had no idea about. I couldn't be Jimmy the bully and be a camp counselor, because what washed over me was, these were my boys. This was my bunk. And putting them to sleep and telling a story was as soothing to me as it was to them. And early on that summer, I was asleep one night. Young camp counselors actually do get some sleep. And I felt something on my knee. And I sort of looked up, and a bat was perched on my knee. So I had a couple of quick options. I could have freaked out, which I really wanted to do. And then Lord knows what would have happened with my 4 boys in the bunk. So I, as quietly as I could and as softly as I could, I grabbed my flashlight and I shone it into Andy and Andrew and David and Todd's eyes to wake them up. And I got them all to get their flashlights out. And David, closest to the door, grabbed his broom from under the bed and sort of opened the door. And I say we, even though only he opened the door, we opened that door. And we all then showed our flashlights out. And I moved my knee, and that bat went straight out the door. So without knowing it, I created this community where we all felt safe and comfortable in bunk 12. And I felt really good about that. And each night at camp, we have an assembly. And at the end, it's a boys' camp. And at the end of each assembly, we sing a song, sort of a lullaby, where the whole camp gets up, and the boys and counselors sort of put their arms around one another, and we sing a song saying good night to camp. And the first line goes like this. Excuse my voice. Good night, Winnebago. We will always be true. And I took that line about always be true to my boys, to my camp, to the community that we created. And as counselors, as the years went by, we would meet at college or people's homes, and we would have our own community. And I realized that once we were together, we were always together. And having taken Latin in high school, and I won't say I studied Latin in high school, but having taken Latin in high school, I knew what always was, semper. But I needed to know what once was. And we were at the University of Pennsylvania one time, and I sort of ran off with my friends and went to the library, and I found a dictionary, and I found once, semel. And since that time, I've held that phrase very close to me, semel semper, once, always. Once you are in a community, once you are with me, you're always with me. And I worked at camp for 32 summers. And I ended up being head counselor and being Uncle Bennett Myers as Uncle Jim for my camp. And I named my son after Uncle Bennett, because somewhere he planted that first seed for me. And I stopped going to camp, and the only thing that made that possible was being at St. Catherine's and having advisories, having a group of girls. And I remember the first year I had an advisory, and I talked about this last year when they were seniors, and I asked them, so what did you think when you heard the famous middle school call out of who your advisor is? Those of you who know exactly what I'm talking about. And they were a little weirded out about that because they knew I'd never been an advisor before, and they know me as the technology guy. So they weren't really sure where things were going to go. And I very intentionally named my advisory as I named each advisory. And this advisory was called the 14 Rivers, because we were all a different river coming down into Bacote Bay, where our building was, or as the girls called it on their own, our safe harbor. And that room became our room. And that advisory was our advisory. And I love those girls, and I still do. And those families I feel a part of to this day. And the simple routines we did, whether it was just sitting around in our circle talking, or writing postcards home every week, those were great value to us in creating that community. And the next year, I had a forest, where we needed to make sure that every tree was healthy in that forest, so the whole forest could be strong. And the year after that, I had the 14 islands, because the islands all are connected down at the bottom, so we all were one together. And then I planted a garden with some wonderful girls, with 12 wonderful girls. And we made sure our soil was rich, and we made sure we were intentional about what we planted. And that is still a beautiful garden that we all have, and it's of such great value to me. I went off to the sky the year after that, because we were limitless in our reach. And this year, I have an awesome frontier. We're not afraid to go places and do things. So every Thursday before we write our postcards, we go somewhere new on campus and take a picture of ourselves. Well, I take a picture of that. And these communities that I create, I tell the girls, whether it's semel semper or it's now and forever, I am there for them. And our communities still exist, even if we grow apart in years. I tell them that as they get older, they keep me young. And there are communities we create on our bay trip, where we go to different islands, and we get unplugged for 3 days. And when we say we're on island time, it's not because the Chesapeake Bay people don't want to hear questions about, what are we doing next? Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? It's so that our island time is time for us to be together as a group and bring that together. And on our Dominican Republic mission trips, while we are serving a community, most importantly, we are creating a community, bonds that we can continue. Now, every year at school, once a year, I go to chapel, and I do a chapel that's called the ILAC. And I believe that everybody carries an ILAC sign. And I first experienced this at camp, where Dr. Bob, a psychologist, would visit camp and talk to camp counselors about how do we foster intentionally a community? How do we make sure that people feel safe and comfortable? And everyone has an ILAC sign. You all have one of these. Every day you wake up with it. And every day things happen printed this ILX sign. Sometimes it's of no fault of anyone that something happens, and other times it's a direct result of somebody doing something. So for instance, you hit that snooze button one more time, and when you come down to breakfast, there's no more French toast. It's your favorite breakfast, and a part of your ILX sign comes off. You get to school, you're late, you go to upper school chapel, and at the end, someone calls out your name. Now everyone knows you were late. You go to your next class, your girls next to you are getting their quizzes back. There's 100, there's a 95, there's a 98, there's your 81. Well, you didn't study. And as the day goes on, there's all these little nicks and rips. But we've got to make sure we're not doing that to one another. You're about to get up from lunch, and one of your friends is coming to sit down. That's when you stay instead of getting up and leaving. We make room for our communities to grow. Now, the nice thing is, at the end of the day, thankfully, you've got some of this left, and you put it under your pillow, and in the morning, when you get up, oh, it's all back together. Look at that. But there's a piece of it missing. And over time, as more and more misses, I'm going to hold on to this even stronger. And I'm going to make sure that nobody can rip my ILX sign. And then what kind of person are you presenting to others? So as I bullied my way through my adolescence, I'm building my way from now on. Because it's important that these are not pieces of armor. This is just who we are, and who we're comfortable being. ILAC stands for I am lovable, which all of you are, and capable, which all of you are, 100%. Now, at the end of ET, beyond Gertie, Elliot comes to say goodbye. And that's a little more rough of a goodbye. And E.T. wants Elliot to come with him. And so E.T. says, go. And Elliot tearfully says, stay. And then E.T. does his ouch. Because that hurts. Because they're going to be apart. And they hug. And it's time for E.T.'s ship to go. Just as he's about to walk away, E.T.'s hand goes out, and the fingertip lights up, and he says, I'll be right here. And that's the community. You must be right here. The incredible privilege we have to be here, to be here, to be on this planet. What we have as a duty and responsibility is we owe to be here for one another, and we most certainly owe to be good. Thank you very much.